The doctrine of divine simplicity. We have simplicity, we have impassibility, we have immutability. My goal today, this morning, is not to prove the doctrine of simplicity from Scripture, although that could be done and has been done by others. Instead, if there's one thing I pray you take away with you this morning, that it would be you would have increased confidence that this doctrine has indeed a rich and long historical pedigree. Along with immutability, impassibility, simplicity has been coined. It's rich in this history, so much so that there's a group of our fellows, pastor scholars, and they've coined it the Great Tradition. And you'll see that in different works out there on the internet and whatnot. There are two texts that modern theology has kind of forgotten. Two texts that modern theology has forgotten. The first is from Psalm 50, verse 21. You thought that I was one like yourself. God is speaking. Psalm 50, 21. You thought that I was one like yourself. And the second one is Isaiah 46, 9. I am God, and there is none like me. So we might say, we, being made in the image of God, God compares us to the things in the world. We do things, but there's two divisions. There's creator, and that's God, and then there's everything else that's created, creature. And that's basically all there is. There's God and everything else. And that's what these scriptures portray. So we need to really keep it in our minds as we talk about this. There's 39 articles. There's the Savoy. There's the Westminster. But, of course, we're Baptists, Reformed Baptists. And so I'm going to quote from our Second London Baptist Confession of Faith, 1689. In chapter 2, paragraph 1, speaking of God, God is a most pure spirit, invisible, without body, parts, or passions. Now, when it says, you can be reading, I don't know how familiar you are with that part of it, but there's a comma after parts. Invisible, without body. It doesn't say without body parts, but that's what it means too. But then there's parts, comma, or passions. Now, do a little pop quiz, not to embarrass anybody. But the Bible speaks of holy angels, right? Yeah, okay. Would they still be angels without holiness? Would there still be angels without holiness? That was the question. And think about it with me. Yes. The reason being is there's holy angels and there's the non-elect angels that fell and they don't have any holiness, right? But they're still angels. Make sense? Okay. So now what could we say about God? Would we say God would still be God without holiness? Or without wisdom? No. So simplicity goes even further to say simplicity goes further than to say God is undivided. It also posits that God is undividable. I don't know if that's a word, but That's what it means. You can divide something, and then something could be undivided. You can't divide it. And that's what simplicity basically boils down to. Simplicity is a subset and a consequence of the doctrine of immutability, meaning God can't change. God does not and cannot change. However, if something has parts, it's composed of those parts, and those parts are dependent on the other parts. I had a whole list of citations from people, theologians that have gone before us, and I had to reconsider. I was going to read a lot of just the quotes, and I thought, no, that's not going to be a blessing to the brothers and sisters. So what I did is I'm incorporating these quotes in kind of boil this down for us. And one of the people that I drew upon, his name is Junius. He's not real popular as far as name, but here's what Junius said. For what is most simple must necessarily always remain as it is and cannot change within itself. Furthermore, all potential for composition, diminishment, or change is wholly excluded. Another little quick quiz question. Can God be dependent on anything? We could look at it this way. Is there anything in God that is not God, causing God to be God? These questions are really mind-boggling, but if you say it slow and you follow it, it makes sense. Is there anything in God that is not God, causing God to be God? What do you think? No. Exactly right. Because they came up with a phrase, and it's been used for many years, and it reverses that sort of. It says, all that is in God is God. All that is in God is God. Now, we can look at, like an example, a bicycle. A bicycle has parts, and the parts are dependent on other parts of the bicycle. Now, if the chain goes off, what's going to happen to the wheels? The wheels aren't going to be able to work because the wheels are dependent upon the chain. Now, if the wheels were not there to be used, it would still be a cycle. Let's say one of the wheels, you took one of the wheels out. It would still be a cycle, but it wouldn't be a by-two cycle. You know, you see in the circus are the people that are real agile, and they on a unicycle, one wheel. And so you get to where you want to go, but from the one example, the bicycle, to the unicycle, what can we say happened? There was change. The bicycle is no longer the same in function and in parts as it was before. So another theologian from the past that I really am biased for, his name is Stephen Charnock. In fact, when I was looking up, he actually co-pastored with Thomas Watson. So it's an interesting connection there. But here's what Stephen Charnock said. God is the most simple being. Now, remember, when we say simple, we don't mean simplistic. We don't mean easy. You know, at Christmas time, you get the kid this gift, and it says, even a child at 5 can put this item together. And what ends up happening is the parents spend all Christmas morning trying to put this thing together. And, it was really simple. But when we talk about God, Charnock tells us, God is the most simple being, for that which is first in nature, having nothing beyond it, cannot by any means be thought to be compounded. Now, God, being infinitely simple, has nothing in himself which is not himself. And this is from a work called The Existence and Attributes of God by Stephen Charnock. It's only like 300 or 400 pages. It's wonderful. And now a theologian named Boethius explains, for God is not one thing because he is, and another thing because he is just. With him, to be just and to be God are one and the same. It's really amazing. Now, we here at SGBC, we know this guy, John Owen. In fact, we're reading one of John Owen's books for our reading. John Owen says this, the attributes of God, which alone seem to be distinct things in the essence of God, are all of them essentially the same with one another, and every one the same with the essence of God itself. It's like a, what's the name of the light that you can shine, a prism. The light, the combined light, it's all white, and it comes into it, but from the angle, you get the reds, the blues, and greens, and oranges, and everything like that. So from one side, we see all of the virtues and attributes of God that we think wisdom, holiness, justice. To us, we have to distinguish them. We have to be that prism. That's the only way we would understand it. But in God, they're all the same. Inside, in him, meaning to him they're the same. And we're not trying to, with the doctrines of whatever it happens to be, we're not trying to get rid of the incomprehensibility of God, because we can't wrap our minds around it. But God has revealed, revealed in Revelation, in the Bible, to give us the truth of who he is and what he does. But that was John Owen. And drawing on Stephen Charnock once again, who would have think it, showing God does not have parts or division, even in terms of our reckoning of time. God is eternal, right? So really, he's timeless. He's outside of what we call time. So this is kind of odd to be speaking, but this is the only way we can speak. To God, there is no before and after. But it's interesting when you read Scripture, guess what? Psalm 102:27. What does it say about God? It talks about his days and his years are not the same as ours. But what the Spirit is doing is condescending to our capacities in signifying the eternity of God by days and years in the terms belonging to time, which is us, whereby we measure it. He doesn't measure time. Remember in the New Testament that scripture that says, for the day of the Lord is like a day and 1,000 years? Yeah. And it's not a one-to-one. If you took one day and counted them up, that would be so many thousands of years. It's an analogy. What it means is, and this is Charnock puts it this way, but referencing Psalm 102:27, but we must no more conceive that God is bounded or measured by time and has succession of days. Because of those expressions, then we can conclude him to have a body, because members are ascribed to him in Scripture, to help our conceptions of his glorious nature and operations. In the scriptures, it'll talk about God bringing the children of Israel out of Egypt with his mighty arm. God doesn't have an arm. He's mighty, but he doesn't have an arm. And it'll say something like, beware, God is everywhere. God sees everything you do. God sees, and we use that, but God doesn't have eyes. So what I've done, I'm using these quotations, and we have early church fathers, reformers, scholastics, Puritans, Anglicans, Presbyterians, Congregationalists, and Baptists. And just for my research here, I was able to accumulate 25 different citations. This is just a small collection that I could have referenced. Have you heard of Anselm? He's one of the early guys, old guys. He was an early church father. So starting with him and going to a person like Herman Bavinck, who I know some of you have read, maybe his systematic theology type work. Just that is a span of 900 years. And so you can imagine, that's just a minimum. I've heard of, in other lectures, one of the brothers, his name is Dr. James Dozell, and he has done a lot of lectures on simplicity and immutability and that. And he mentioned sometimes 1,700 years of this historical great tradition. And I don't want to take too long because I know we have communion, but let me encourage you, brothers and sisters, to look more into the doctrine of simplicity. And what would it mean for us today? Well, your bicycle, your car, your bicycle has some parts. Your car has thousands of parts, maybe 6,000 parts. A Boeing 747 has millions of parts. And when something, and it's interesting that we use this phrasing, when a part falls off and is no longer useful, what do we say is happening to that? It's falling apart. It doesn't mean apart, but it was just funny the way that comes out. But let me assure you, brothers and sisters, God does not have parts. He's not going to fall apart. You can always go to him. He is our rock. And I know that the authors of Scripture knew about this. It's not called simplicity as explained by the theologians, but it would cause the writer of Hebrews in chapter 13 and verse 8, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday and today and forever. May God bless our communion service.